Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We are the Women's Leadership Society, and we are so proud to present today's speaker to you. I'm going to pass it on to Ashley, but I'm one of the co-directors of the Women's Leadership Society, Madeline Libby.
Hi, everyone. I'm the other co-director of the Women's Leadership Society, Ashley. Just before I start, for anyone who's not familiar with Zoom, once we start screen sharing, if you ever want to change your view in the top right corner, you should be able to choose between speaker, gallery, and a few other options there. Welcome to Storytelling, Creating Human Connections on a Job Search, presented by the amazing Cheryl Farrell. Cheryl is a writer, corporate communications consultant, and award-winning performance storyteller. She writes from a point of view to promote hope, especially for racial equality or equity and social justice. The Women's Leadership Society is very excited to have her here with us today to teach us how to turn our life work experiences into meaningful stories that we can use on resumes and in interviews. And now I will pass it on to Cheryl.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I am an Annenberg graduate from back in the day. I won't tell the year, but I have been keeping close touch with the Alumni Association for the last few decades. I'm thrilled to be here because I have a passion for communications, particularly as it helps to advance women's issues and for those of people of color. I met our host today at a Annenberg guest lecture last fall, and Ashley and Libby came up to me and they said, would you mind sharing your story with our group? And I couldn't wait to join you. So I'm thrilled to be here. You know, it's difficult to ignore the challenges of the past couple of years. When I first did a guest lecture in March of 2020, we thought it would be just a few months that we'd be under quarantine and be kind of an interesting adventure. Now it's almost 2 years later. And in that time, almost 800,000 people have lost their lives. But in that same period from 2020 to 2021, there have been 34,000 USC graduates. There were careers launched, businesses created, and education that continued. And behind those statistics are stories of hope, resilience, and courage. It's the power of those stories in all of us that I want to present to you today, particularly as you enter into the job market. So let's get started. Our goals for today are threefold. That is to show how the human connection is important in a job search, how storytelling is an engaging method to make those connections, and that to underscore the point that everyone has a story and every story matters. Philosopher and poet Khalil Gibran wrote, "It's been said that next to hunger and thirst, our most basic human need is for storytelling." In the busyness of writing resumes and holding Zoom interviews and filling out job applications, we can forget that there are real people on the other side of reviewing those submissions. So here's how we plan to connect storytelling to that job search effort. This is our agenda. I know we're in an academic setting, so I think this is appropriate. Reminds me of when you get on a plane and the flight attendant says, "Now we're headed to Bora Bora. If you're on the wrong plane, disembark." This is where we're headed today. I'm going to tell you the Cheryl Farrell story. I'm going to define what storytelling for organizations means. We're going to do a little group exercise. We're going to talk about the science of storytelling. It's not just a creative endeavor. Then we're going to hone in on storytelling for the job search. That's what the draw was for today. In that storytelling job search, we want to know our characters, create a story arc, You want to have a story that makes me care. And then we're going to talk about what it means to have an attitude for storytelling. I'll have some closing thoughts, and then we're going to have an interactive session where we want to hear what you're working on. Is there a resume that you're struggling with? Is there an interview coming up or an interview that has passed? It may venture a little bit off of storytelling, but I want to use that section to just talk about what's going on in the job search arena and how the storytelling concepts may apply. So who is Cheryl Farrell? That was actually a quote by Alex Trebek 20 years ago. I was on the sound stage at Sony, and they were doing a promo reel for the Clue Crew. It would be individuals who had recently joined the show. And so in the tradition of Jeopardy, you respond in the form of a question. So he says, who is Cheryl Farrell? That question here has to do with how I organize my brand, if you will. I have a disparate set of events and experiences over the years. And for many years, I apologized about that. There wasn't a business card big enough to put down all the things I've done. But when I found those dots connecting, there were these points that made a path. And what I found was communications flowed through everything I was doing. From working at banks, at Rand, at hospitals, to being on television, there was a theme of communications, and that's my story. So for the purposes of today, I have these three buckets that I put my story into. It's corporate communications strategist and writer. There's a deep well of activities that support that. I'm most proud of 30 years of HR and internal communications experience. Then there's this performance storyteller, advocate person. I've been in storytelling since 2012 at the Moth, Unheard LA, a KPCC platform, a couple of other stage areas. Again, Jeopardy on air talent. I've been a music producer for diabetes advocacy organizations. And then this third bucket is continuous learner. I just want to remain curious about what's ahead. Even though I've accomplished certain things, I'm still curious about what's next. So those are just a few little credentials and evidence of that curiosity, but it's not always in degrees, in academic achievements. It's an attitude of wanting to know more. Next slide. Okay. So I mentioned Jeopardy. When I graduated, I came as a mid-career professional. And I was working in a bank at the time, and I wanted to branch into communications. I was so excited with my graduate degree. But at that time, my husband, 16 years, said, let's move to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Now, I've been an urban girl for a long time, and there was nothing about Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, that I was interested in. But as the dutiful wife, I packed my two young children, and we went to this beautiful home adjacent to an Amish farm. I went online just to see what life was like back in LA, and I went to the job search page at Annenberg. Susan Alcantara was overseeing that job search. Now, I think she's a vice dean at this point, but I recall reaching out to her saying, I saw this job ad from the Sony people looking for potential graduates of USC. So I submitted an audition tape, a VHS tape, that's how long ago it was, and so did 4,000 other people. I was selected out of this audition of everyday Joes. You didn't have to have any communication, any TV experience. It was the most amazing experience. I was there 7 years. I toured 15 countries. I appeared on air over 1,000 times. I enjoyed going out to school visits that were part of the assignment. But the point of sharing this is that the job I most enjoyed didn't exist at the moment that I was graduating. And so it may be for you. So this idea of following your calling, do what you're interested in, and the dots will connect. It will make sense, even though right now you don't understand. So I want you to keep that in mind as we're talking about the job search, that you could easily become discouraged if you can't see how it's working out in the moment. So next slide. So what is storytelling? Just so that we're on a level playing field, the idea of storytelling is used in so many different ways. Some people are thinking about it being Sesame Street or fairy tales, once upon a time, and they lived happily ever after. But it's a bona fide terminology in business settings outside of children's literature. Typically, the definition of storytelling is to communicate something personal that inspires others to feel and to think. These are typically live events popularized by public radio's The Moth, Unheard LA, independent story salons all over the world. These storytelling events are typically theme-based. They are scripted stories with characters, structure, and they're presented either in person, podcast, or radio. Next slide. But organizational storytelling is a concept that I morphed from this traditional method and to apply it to organizations. That is in-person stories told by employees to employees for the purpose of enhancing interaction, not just entertainment, but as a means of becoming better connected. Individuals learn they have more in common with each other than just work similarities. It improves group cohesiveness for greater collaboration and productivity. And this is founded on a social psychologist, anyone at Annenberg would be familiar with, Leon Bessinger, who talks about the theory of group cohesiveness. And then there's been subsequent research that says a cohesive work environment increases the likelihood of employee satisfaction and serves as an incentive for employees to arrive prepared and willing to conquer the tasks of the day. And I'm spending a little bit of time on this commercial for the work that I do in my day job to show that those same principles of engagement can apply in your work environment, can apply in your job search, that this feeling that you are connected to another human being can advance whatever the agenda you have, whether it's meeting sales goals or whether it's getting a job. Okay. Now we're going to have an interactive session. Before we pull the slide down, let me tell you the rules. I want to demonstrate the power of telling a story among what we have 43 folk on the 43 participants. And each of us has a story. So I want to do a little exercise to demonstrate the power of that story. So I know we have guests on, but I want to focus this to our Women's Leadership Society participants. I want you to fill in the blank. My Annenberg WLS colleagues would be surprised to know that My Annenberg WLS colleagues would be surprised to know that and I want you to put it in the chat room and only send it to me. Send me a private message because I don't want others influenced by what someone else says. So I'm going to do a little Jeopardy think music.